What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 29 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Flip Screen Games weekly podcast all about Valve's hot new handheld, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my partner in Steam Deck-related crimes, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I should be saying welcome back to you because I'm fairly sure you weren't on last week's episode.
Yeah, it's like generally, it's good. It's good to be back. It's good to be back on the show. I'm happy to be back for another week of the Steam Deck podcast, especially because very, very special day here. We're celebrating 1 year, the loose birthday of the Steam Deck.
Yeah, it is the loose birthday. So the Steam Deck was officially available for purchase on the 25th of February last year. And then the first unit shipped on the 28th of February. So people didn't start getting them in their hands until March. So I'm happy to say it's around 1 year since people started getting the Steam Deck.
I feel like you gotta act like it's like the Steam Deck is like a spoiled little kid, and it's like you get the birthday month, right? Because it's like when you got it, it's very murky, but we're somewhere in the birth month right now. So happy birthday to the Steam Deck, and we're gonna be talking all about the Steam Deck's first year on the market a little bit later on. But before that, we got some good news to jump into here. I know this is one that you've been excited about for a while, so let's just kick things off, right? Ray tracing finally coming to the Steam Deck as of the Steam Deck OS 3.4.6 beta.
Yeah, absolutely huge news. So this broke. Broke today as of time of recording. So we're recording this on Friday, and they've updated the graphics driver to the Mesa 23.1 driver. Which has not only fixed issues with a couple of games, most notably Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. So if you're playing that game, I know that's pretty hot at the moment. You're going to want to switch over to the beta branch. But they've also added ray tracing. At the moment, it's only available in Doom Eternal, but I know it's going to be coming to other games. That's because Doom Eternal uses Vulkan API, so the Mesa driver can directly connect to it. But Plagman over on Twitter, obviously Valve's kind of head honcho following up the Steam Deck stuff.
Our boy
when
Griff.
It's not Lawrence, it's Plagman.
Yeah, Griff, of course.
Yeah, our boy Griff. Yeah,
big Griff.
He said that that DXR is also in the pipe, but it's not just quite ready yet, and that is DirectX ray tracing. So they're going to have that transpilation layer Proton doing its magic and bringing ray tracing to other games at some point. Now, I downloaded Doom Eternal. It took me many, many hours on my terrible internet connection. Downloaded 90 gigabytes of Doom Eternal so I could try this.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's not something I personally would choose to pick. So when you open up Doom Eternal, you get an option between ray tracing or balance. Previously, you only had the option to choose the balanced mode. And the ray tracing was completely locked out, but that's now available. And if you want to change, you can switch to the settings. So if you've been playing Doom Eternal and you want to try ray tracing, you can kind of swap back and forth between them. You'll get around 30 to 40 FPS out of it. So if you cap it at 30 frames per second, you can have like a pretty decent ray tracing experience. I think it's definitely using dynamic resolution. It looked a little bit blurry in places, and I think for me, for a game that's so heavy on action, that's like high paced, high action, I think I would probably go for the balanced mode and aim for the 60 FPS.
Yeah,
personally.
Frame rate in Doom is pretty important.
Yeah, in Doom, I agree with you. I think when this comes to other titles, though, ones that would potentially be less focused on action, more on fidelity, I think I probably could see myself going for a ray traced option if it's 30 FPS that I'm getting out of the system. I'd be interested in seeing some benchmarks, seeing how that affects like battery life and things like that.
It's very interesting because I think the game that I've talked about this before, but like the game that made that dichotomy the most apparent to me was playing Persona 5 Royal on Steam Deck, and it's like, oh, like this is running at a lower resolution than it was on my PS4 Pro, but like it looks and feels better because it's running at a more stable frame rate. And it's not like it was a graphically intensive game anyway, right? So like that game outputting at, like 720 versus 1080 or 800 versus 1080, it's like it's really not making as much of a difference as the frame rate side of it, and Doom is definitely one of those examples where, you're not going to care about fidelity as much. But for something that is maybe like a slower pace, something turn-based, something like that where, you're not really like missing a dropped frame here or there, or you're comfortable
Or
locked in at
something
30.
story driven. Like I could easily see this on something like a Life is Strange or something where they like maybe put like
Sure.
a ray trace
Yeah.
mode. It's like watching a movie, or even The Quarry, right? If they can get ray tracing into The Quarry working, being able to essentially like plug that into your TV, have that ray trace experience running at 30 FPS. It doesn't really matter about the action in that game. It's really just
Yeah.
QTE based and decision based. Those kind of games I think could really benefit from ray tracing. It's nice. I like the fact that we've got the option. It's very exciting that this is now finally coming. And obviously, this isn't just for Steam Deck users. This is anyone running Linux now can have access to ray tracing through the Proton layer at some point. It was when the DirectX ray tracing comes there.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Steve. I'm going to pull this question from the question block. This one comes from Yonug, who wrote in and said, "I know it's on Valve time, TM, but when do you think that the Steam OS 3 general release will finally drop?" I think this is an interesting one, right? Because again, like we've been talking a lot about, a couple weeks ago we did an episode about like, could this be the year of Linux gaming, right? What is the future of Linux gaming? And I think being able to have parity with some of those features that, I think PC gamers come to expect, like things like ray tracing, that's a big step forward for sure.
Yeah, I think the next one there's two other things that I think are really missing that PC gamers are going to want, which is VRR support in the gaming mode. You can have it in desktop mode, and that works through DisplayPort. But I also think we need HDR support, and I know they've been working on that. It's in the new beta of the new big picture mode. There's now in the developer settings options for HDR. It's not come to the Steam Deck yet, but I can imagine they're working on it probably for 3.5. It's probably in the pipe for that one. I could easily see them getting 3.5 out of the way. I know that they've mentioned that they're working on some of the stuff that we spoke about. I think it was either on last week's show or the week before about the simultaneous multi-threading optimizations and potentially having that toggle in there. So I could see them kind of getting 3.5 out of the way, and then they look to focus on bringing that as the first main release. It seems like it's it's the halfway mark between version 3 and, well, I mean, it's not really on version 4 because they can do 3.10, 3.11, so it's no issue. But I kind of feel like that seems like a natural point at which they're like, okay, right, it's time to release this out to the mainstream, have our installer, because there was the installer that was found on their repo, their public repo, a few months back. So they've clearly been working towards it. It's just a case of when and what their priorities are. I would imagine getting features like this onto the Steam Deck is probably more of a priority than focusing on releasing this for the mainstream. But I do think that they want people to be able to install Windows on their Steam Decks, and the official installer is only going to come when we get the official installer for SteamOS 3.
There you go. So, before we get into our birthday talk, we did briefly want to just touch on February's top Steam Deck titles. I think these are just sort of a fun thing, right? Like every month, Valve loves to put out the top 20 games that are being played on Steam Deck, sorted by playtime over on the official Steam Deck Twitter. And I think it's always interesting because there's a lot of games that I think are always predictably on the list, right? Like whatever like the hot new games are that happen to run okay on Steam Deck. But I think it's always more interesting to see what are the old games that have jumped up into the top 20 and why, So it's always interesting. But given a rundown of the 20 games, this is in order. It starts with Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, Vampire Survivors, Stardew Valley, Red Dead Redemption 2, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Grand Theft Auto 5, Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim Special Edition, Hades, Brotato, Persona 5 Royal, Monster Hunter Rise, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, Fallout 4, Cyberpunk 2077, Valheim, Slay the Spire, Marvel's Midnight Suns, NBA 2K23, and Project Zomboid.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these have been in here, I feel like, since day one of Steam Deck's release, like Vampire Survivors and Elden Ring. I feel like they're always there. Same with GTA and Red Dead Redemption 2.
Well, see, but Red Dead one, think about it, that was a recent addition because for a while it didn't work on Steam Deck, and then once they patched
but
it,
since it did, then it's been there ever since. Yeah, it's always been. Stardew Valley's always been in there as well. But yeah, it's always interesting to take a look at what
A-
people are playing. Obviously,
And it's like Witcher
Hogwarts Legacy
3.
runs.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
I would say obviously Hogwarts Legacy runs phenomenally well on Steam Deck, so a lot of people have been picking that one up. So
And then, like looking again at some of the older ones, like Witcher 3, right? That had a recent update and it shot up on these charts and hasn't gone away. And I think a lot of those games are like, they are bigger, meatier games that take a long time. So, like, if you started it a month or two ago, you're probably still playing it, you know? Always interesting. And like Marvel's Midnight Suns jumping back up, that obviously got a couple
and the
recent
free to play
patches,
weekend
free to play weekend. And then it's also on sale right now for like half off.
makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense why people choose to pick it up.
It's always interesting. I always think it's fun to just kind of see how that top 20 ebbs and flows month to month. And I definitely think it's something that's true of like PC gaming and the Steam ecosystem in general, that like it feels more fluid and it feels less like about always what the new game is rather than kind of like what the trend of the moment is, right? That's often influenced by things like sales and updates and all these things. I think you've seen that more broadly this generation, where like older games are having a longer tail and getting a new lease on life because less games are getting put out, and things like that. But yeah, it's always interesting. I think that Steam top, especially specifically the Steam Deck top 20, is a very interesting microcosm of like just what the Steam Deck audience is getting up to these days. So, before we get into the birthday conversation, let me remind you that this week's episode of the Steam Deck podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of March. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Asobi, Wakahula, Snackigo, and Ty the Dude. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go become a Patreon producer, if you want to write into the show, just like people did for the question block segment, however you want to get involved or get in touch, you can head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find all the ways you can interact with us all over the web, many of which will not cost you a pretty penny. However you choose to get involved, we appreciate you tuning into this week's show. So, it's a happy birthday here for our favorite new handheld, the Steam Deck. Like you said, first available to buy February 25th. First unit shipped out February 28th. At this point, we have 8,000 verified titles. How are we feeling about this thing?
I mean, it's done phenomenally well, right? It's I think exceeded both of our expectations. The whole verified titles thing, I think, is a bit of a red herring. Like everyone
Sure.
looks at the 8,000 verified titles, but how many verified games are you actually playing at every given time? It's like I'm going in, I'm playing games that are still marked as incompatible because if you check out Proton DB, it'll tell you exactly how to fix the problem. That's usually just like a switch to Proton GE, and they'll solve the issue. And it's just like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, I'm over the moon with my Steam Deck. I still absolutely love it. I still play it almost every single day. It's like a dream device for me, being able to play big meaty games on the go, but also having just like a huge collection of indie titles and retro games at my hand, like at my fingertips. It's just, yeah, it's everything I could have wanted.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it very much to me feels like a in a weird way like a spiritual successor to the role that my PSP played back in the day, right? Where it's like, yes,
Yeah.
it is kind of like the other handheld, right? Like in my life, aside from the Nintendo Switch, but I think beyond that, so much of what its unique value prop is like kind of what you can do with it if you're willing to tinker, what you can do with it if you take advantage of folks in the community like you, right, who develop original plugins and all these things that you can do crazy stuff with it. That I think,
Yeah, I mean, not even that, right? Like, it was, I feel like maybe a week or 2 weeks after people started getting their hands on the Steam Deck, we had EmuDeck like on the scene,
oh my
making
god,
it super easy to get all of these emulators up and running. Even on day one, though, you had the Discover store that you could just open up in desktop mode, and you had access to the Dolphin emulator, to Yuzu, to whatever emulator you wanted. It was there, ready to install. All you had to do was provide your ROMs or your BIOS files, and away you go. Like next to no effort. And I think that really opened people's eyes to the fact that, wow, we've been in these closed wall gardens where we've not been able to install anything outside of what Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo kind of wanted to shove our way. And I think Valve has opened people's eyes to the fact that there is another way. You can have a successful product and a successful digital marketplace while still allowing people to utilize other services, and not just like competing stores. Fair enough if you don't want to have that, but being able to install community software, I think, has been a game changer for the Steam Deck, and I don't think it would have become as popular with people who were maybe on the edge of buying it, but then they saw something like EmuDeck or saw the fact that you can cloud stream from an Xbox or from your PlayStation 5, and that really just like was just like, okay, fair enough, I'll buy one then.
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of those things ended up being kind of a Trojan horse, right? Where it was like they were the thing that made me be like, oh, okay, I can see how a Steam Deck fits into my use case, right? My needs. And then it was all the other things that I found myself doing with it on top of that, that, kept it in such regular rotation, whether it was playing, the hot new indie games there rather than having to wait a year and change for them to come to like Switch or another, console platform where I'd rather play them. But also like, I think removing some of the friction between things like ROM hacks and like fan games and things that I had been interested in the past, but didn't want to play on a computer, right? Because, historically, and this was always the barrier for you and me as PC players, was like, we work on computers, right? Like we both work in tech, and being on your computer for 9-10 hours a day for work, it's not super attractive to continue staying holed up in your office and gaming there when you want to be, in your living room. You want to be spending time with your partner. You want to like leave the room that you were in the rest of the day, right? And
Well, I think that's just such a big thing for me. It's just like being in a different area,
yeah,
different space, or just wanting to lie down on the couch, right? It's why console gaming, I think, for both of us was always so appealing. But I've always loved handhelds, so that's why the Switch was such a big like game changer for me as well.
hmm
That I could plug it into my TV and then also take these console quality games away with me. And I think the Steam Deck just took that to the next level with giving us all of this power in our hands and also having this just completely open marketplace.
yeah, and it made me look into things that I had been interested in for years. Like I spent a lot of time with like Pokemon Radical Red last year. And like that's something that like I had read about, I had talked to with friends about, I had tried putting it on a laptop and playing it that way, but it just wasn't an optimal experience, and it was just not how I wanted to engage with it, it was never comfortable. And then it was like, oh, I have it in this perfect, on this perfect device that is the Steam Deck for, kind of filling in all those gaps for me, and I think in a lot of ways my Steam Deck feels kind of like a Swiss Army knife console where like, I have a specific use case for my Nintendo, my PlayStation, my Xbox, and whenever one of those doesn't, cover a base, I feel like the Steam Deck has like perfectly slotted itself in as like the fourth pillar now, and like I find myself using it as much or more than a lot of my other platforms, depending on what I'm playing, right? Like last year, I spent so much time playing a lot of like indie games on it, and there were long periods where, especially my Switch, right, but where all my other consoles were sitting because I was just devoting all my time to Steam Deck, which is great. And, it's like right now it's been a little bit more of the inverse, where like I've got some stuff I'm playing on my Switch, so Steam Deck's been taking a bit of a break. I'm really only playing Persona on it now, but like that's fine, right? Because I know that in a couple months there's going to be that hot new indie, there's going to be that new thing that pulls me back in, and I think to I guess kind of transition into our initial impressions, looking back, a year, like I think that was my biggest concern with it, was that it was going to feel like a gimmick device on some level, and that it was a thing I would get, I'd tinker with, I'd set it up, and then I just wouldn't use it that
Well,
often.
what were your initial impressions when you first saw the product? Because I can remember having a conversation with you, and you were surprised that I wanted to pre-order one.
I
Like I was
was.
just like, yeah, I'm all in on this. I was like, I was so excited for it. It seemed like a dream device to me, and like you were a bit surprised by that. I think now in hindsight, having seen how much I've tinkered with it and how much I've kind of gone down that avenue, I think maybe it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I think
Um,
when you initially expressed interest in it, I was so surprised because like you were so not a PC player, right? And
yeah.
like I was just like I remember asking, I was like, what do you think you're gonna use this thing for? Like I was very confident that you were gonna get it and you were gonna play with it a little bit and then it was gonna be like one of those, like handheld emulator like type devices that we had both been interested in and talked about
Yeah.
getting, and you bought one and you put an emulator on it and you were like, look, I booted up Minish Cap on it, and then that was the last I ever heard of that thing, right? Like,
No, I hacked a Vita. I didn't even bother buying
oh,
one. I
okay,
hacked my
okay,
Vita and
okay.
played on it,
Fair, yeah, yeah,
which
you're right,
was
you're right.
fun. And I planned to do a video on it at some point, but then the Steam Deck came out, and it was sort of like it's kind of no point to hack a
Yeah,
Vita these
right.
days.
Um, so yeah, I kind of expected it to go that way, right? Where I was like, yeah, like this is a thing that you're gonna drop $600 on this thing so that you can put an emulator on it and never play them. Okay, all right, bud. And yeah, I mean, I was also I think pretty bullish about the idea that I didn't think it was gonna work out, right? Given um I think Valve's some of their previous missteps with hardware. Like we talked a lot about the Steam machines at that time, and um, yeah, I think I just underestimated them really. Like I didn't think that they were gonna have the follow through on it to really make it stand out as more than like a niche kind of um what's the word I'm looking for? Like not just a niche device, but something that would only appeal to a certain segment of their
Yeah, it's like
audience.
a niche of enthusiasts, right? It's a tiny, small segment. I think more a
Yeah,
lot of people thought it was going to cater to those people that already had a PC and wanted to get into that. I think in hindsight, though, having spoken to you, like I know you said the people that you know who have bought Steam Decks don't really play PC games and
I have
haven't really
one
played PC
friend
games.
who owns one that is a PC gamer. He has always been a PC first guy, and he has a PlayStation and a Nintendo system every generation specifically for exclusives. Other than that, he's on PC, right? But every other person I know got it because they were interested in it specifically as a handheld or as an emulator.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I'm probably the same. I mean, I only know you and Max and my dad that have bought them. Um, But I have shown it to a bunch of people who have never played a PC game before, and everyone's always been excited about it because there's always that one game that someone constantly plays all the time on their console. Like my best friend always plays Hitman, and I just remember him playing Hitman on it for the first time, and I was like, "Yeah, it's really cool, isn't it? The fact that you can just like take this with you and play it." It was incredible. But yeah, I remember the initial impressions. I remember the website crashing when I tried putting my pre-order down and being really annoyed that it took me 6 minutes to get my order through. I had like an alarm set. I was there on the page ready to pay. Took 6 minutes to get my order through, and I still only got my Steam Deck in April last year. Um, it took them that long to get through 6 minutes of orders, which was insane to me. I really wonder how small that first initial production run was. Um, but just unboxing, I remember unboxing that live on Twitch with everyone like asking questions and like
Yeah.
showing it. It was really, really cool, really exciting, and just like playing games on it straight away. Just like, oh, let's download Aperture Desk Job and try it out. Let's download. We were playing Stacklands at the time, and I was like, I really want to try this because it doesn't work with a controller. Let's try out a different control scheme, see if the touchscreen's any good or the trackpads are good. And just like the initial feel of the device, which we've spoken about many times, it just felt larger. It was a physically larger device than I had anticipated, which is silly, really. But the fact that the weight is just distributed great, your hands just fall on the triggers and on the sticks, and it just felt right.
And it's so funny because like you talk about that kind of initial wave, and like that was what convinced me to buy one. Right, was like you getting one and you being excited about it. I was like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was gonna be. So I want to get in on it, and um,
Yeah, because we did a few episodes of the Flip Screen Games podcast before we were just like, we should really kind of go all in on the Steam Deck and make it
Yeah.
its own podcast because it was capitalizing that podcast.
We were talking about it
For
every
weeks
week.
and weeks and weeks. It was all we were talking about. We're just like, we need to get back to just talking about games on that podcast, and we should probably make it its own thing. And that's when we started doing the Steam Deck podcast, which makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I definitely felt like a bit of an asshole with that whole thing because I totally bypassed all of the, I didn't sign up for one on day one. I wasn't waiting in line. I casually mentioned on maybe the second episode we did about the Steam Deck, I was like, all right, I want one. If anybody in the community has a pre-order, and you don't want it, let me know. And like that week, Mango from the community, right? Who came through and was like, hey, like I got one, I can't get it anymore, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it, like let's absolutely do this.
Yeah, but you paid it forward though, like you did keep your place in queue and you
I
gave it to someone else. Yeah, so it wasn't like you just canceled yours. And
no, but it was funny because my friend who I just mentioned before, who's like the only PC gamer I know who has a Steam Deck, was like, I sent him a picture of it when I got it. He was like, you son of a bitch. He's like, I signed up day one. I've been waiting. I'm checking my queue every single day. How did you get one?
Yeah, I remember checking the queue, going on Reddit. People were like doing the math, figuring out.
Oh, mine's going to
like
come 6 weeks from now.
Yeah, it was like, what's your date? Like, go to this API URL, copy the timestamp, paste it into this. You'll figure out exactly how many Valve shipped. Then they started doing like 2 emails a week instead of 1 email a week, and it was like, yeah. I still think though the purchasing process for me, aside from the initial crash on launch, was kind of flawless. It stopped you having to check every single day, every single time that, like, say, PlayStation would have a restock. You'd have to go around all of these different websites, hope that you had like accounts set up and you're ready to go through the checkout process and all this stuff. Valve's solution of, well, give us 10, I think it was $10 for or $5, and you can secure your place in a queue, and we'll just tell you when you're ready to buy one and when your kind of ticket comes up. I think it's a much more sensible way of doing things. And I think ultimately that's probably where things are going to get to, especially if the next console generation goes digital only, which Sony seems to be pressing on towards.
That's a topic for a Flip Screen Games podcast. That's an interesting one. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean they did kind of copy it in Europe because they have PlayStation Direct, which is their store, and you could only purchase it if you already had like a PS4 and you already had like a PSN account. Like, it was a similar approach they followed. It wasn't quite as intense as Valve's, which was, we want to try and stop scalpers, so you have to purchase before this date, have an account for this time, and being kind of in good standing before you can even pre-order the thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think aside from the like frustration that people experienced with wanting one and not being able to get one, I agree with you. Like, I think for them planning it to be a limited run, like or not limited run, that's not what I mean, like a limited amount of like launch units, right? Where it was a controlled stock. I think they handled it as best they could, and they made it pretty simple, right? Where if you decided it, yeah, maybe you couldn't make an impulse purchase of one, but you could put your $5 down, and when it was your time, it was your time, And I think, yeah, for all the trials and tribulations that many folks went through to get their hands on a PlayStation 5 and to a lesser extent a Series X, yeah, it would be nice to see that become more standard, at least, I would love if there was some kind of like,
even if I could do it at a retailer, like, let me just say at Amazon, if I'm a Prime customer, I put my like $10 down, and it puts me in a queue for this hot product, and then I know as soon as it comes in stock, they're just going to ship me one.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have that.
It would be nice too if there was a situation like, because Valve's was tied to you already having an active Steam account, right? Like, it would be cool if they had something like that where it's like, oh, like, you're a PlayStation 4 owner, right? And it's like, all right, cool. Like, here's your link, right? So that you can get in line at some point, right? Like some kind of system like that, where rather than just having to like have the luck of the draw, you were given some level of preferential treatment.
yeah, Microsoft did that at some point with Series X because you could purchase one through the Xbox dashboard. So if you had an Xbox One, you
Yes.
could log on to your Xbox One and buy one there, and that was the only way you could buy one from Microsoft for a while.
I think that's a good way to do it, though, right? Like just
Yeah,
right
it's
on the
pretty smart.
box. The Xbox is good about that in general because I remember they did that with when they had that presentation, the Xbox Bethesda presentation recently, like on the homepage. It was like, oh, do you want to watch it? And they would just open it and play it, like
Yeah, it's like, or you could just see all the games that were announced, or
and
all the
click
games
through
that came to
and
Game Pass today. Yeah.
It's like that's awesome. You know, it's like I would love to see more stuff like that where it's like you can kind of create like a straight line, you know, and I think Valve did a good job of it, right? Because it was all through Steam. You know, you weren't going to this third party website. Like it was just like go on your Steam account, add it to cart like you would any game, and you'll get your email when you get your email.
Yeah, and you could tell like it was all set up for games because it was not ready for them to ship hardware, even though they've been shipping hardware for over a decade at this point, since Steam boxes and the Steam controller and Steam Link and the Index and the HTC Vive. Like they've been shipping hardware for a long time, but this is really the first en masse product that they've properly shipped. And while we're talking about Steam boxes, go check. Everyone should go check out Linus Tech Tips video this week. They got a hold of a prototype Steam box, which was really cool. And Plagman over on Twitter actually called it out that the way they knew which one was which. They didn't have serial numbers on, but they beveled one of the like fan holes.
Wow,
So that they would know which one it was and who it got given to.
that's incredible. That's going to be the next antiquated piece of Valve hardware that you buy, right?
I'd love to start collecting that stuff. I love my Steam controller. I hope they make another one. That would be the next big piece of hardware I want them to focus on after the Deckard, which they're obviously working on.
Yeah, they could shelve that and give me the controller. You know, VR headsets
sure,
are dead,
I'm
right?
sure they'll shelve that.
Isn't that what you and Max talked about on Flip Screen? Isn't VR dead? Isn't that what you said? I didn't say it. Go
Yeah,
yell
I
at
think
Steve.
VR's definitely dead. Yeah.
Dead in the water, dead on
playing it.
arrival. Controllers though, controllers never go out of style. Oh yeah, all the PC players are gonna string me up by my gills, you know, force me to breathe air.
I think a lot of PC players play with controllers these days. I'd love to know. If you're a PC player, let me know down in the comments because I kind of want to know.
I feel like it's dependent on the game, right? Like there's certain genres where you want mouse. If you're playing an FPS, you're playing an RTS, you're playing a MOBA, right? Like you want mouse and keyboard, or you know, any kind of management kind of game like that. You want mouse and keyboard.
Oh yeah, like a Tycoon or a management sim. Yeah.
But I feel like if you're playing a fighting game, you're playing, maybe like a third person, open world type game, you're probably playing on a controller, right? Like.
Yeah, you're right. But I think some games have made the shift because I remember when Diablo came out, and Diablo's been like a point and click use a mouse game since like its inception, and then
3 came out, and
Diablo 3 came out, and it's like you need to use a controller really for this because you want to roll around, and it's got like full 8-way controls now instead of just like it was full 360 controls instead of just the 8-way isometric. So yeah. These games can make the jump.
Man, I'm looking forward to Diablo 4. I can't wait for that one.
Me too.
It's going to be fun.
Me too.
That's a game.
And Baldur's Gate 3 in the same year. It's an exciting year for me and my old PC roots.
What a time to be alive. all these high fantasy games coming out. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Max and I were talking about that on Flip Screen this week. Somebody asked like what's going to be the next trend in gaming, and Max was like maybe like Magic, and I was like there are a lot of high fantasy games coming out in the next couple months, Not months, I guess, but year and change.
Yeah.
Between those two, you've got Disavowed, right? Is the Obsidian one that's like the Elder Scrolls
Obsidian one, yeah. Yeah, I do wonder.
Fable, right?
I
like
know.
there's some stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, a lot over on the Microsoft camp, but what's Sony working on?
Oh, they just had Forspoken. Who could forget? The seminal Magic. Seminal Magic.
So that the studio got folded into its parent company. Yeah, it was so popular.
Isn't that so rough? It's like, dude, that game just came out. Like the body's not even cold.
No, you don't get to keep going with this. We're cutting you off. You're coming over.
Was that like their first game too? Like,
yes, it was.
Oh my god! At least give him a second at bat, right? Like Jesus. But anyway, that's a Flip Screen conversation. So I think one of the other things that's been really exciting about keeping up with the Steam Deck, right, has been like just how rapidly it evolves, right? Like how
Gotcha.
between the software, the the OS, like the dock support, like all those things. Like we've seen in just a year so many um things come out and be a standard and then be replaced and iterated on, and sometimes that's just from Valve proper, but sometimes it is through collaboration with the community, like the like the boot custom boots and everything, right, which was like totally a fan
Yeah, I
made
mean,
thing,
yeah,
and then
that was
Valve brought
it
it.
was fan-made thing, yeah, because, like, they found the folder, but then they, like, embraced it and brought it in,
And
but
they're
e
like, oh, cool.
I was going back through, like, the news and updates page, and there were 30 pages of updates since its launch, but even stuff, like, back to March 10th, right? So, like, 2 weeks after its initial launch, we get Windows drivers. Then there's like all sorts of other features come, like updates to the store, bug fixes. It was like coming in hot. It was pretty clear at launch. It was not where they wanted it to be in terms of software. Like we only got a lock screen. Do you remember? We only got a lock screen in April. Didn't
Yes.
launch with a lock screen. Like you could not. It was an insecure device. Like you couldn't really leave your house with it and not worry about someone just purchasing stuff because you were not locked out. Um, and in May, we got per game performance profiles. It was initially just like a global
Yeah.
performance profile, and then you could like tick it so it was just for that one game. In June, we got the what in June we got the screen refresh change, which was a huge one, being able to like
Yeah, that was one you'd
chuck
been
it
like
down to
asking for a long time, I remember.
yeah, and like it was found to be working in Windows by the Forks, a YouTuber. And then they were just like, "Yeah, we're working on it, but we want to make it work better. Like the delay between the screen refresh change is just a little bit too much at the moment." And then yeah, they brought it out and it was available, and you could just go down and lock it at 40 hertz and just have these 40 frames per second games working. It was great, really great. Like just the amount of stuff they kept adding to the Steam Deck week in, week out. It was crazy.
And continue to, you know? Like that's
Yeah,
that's
and
the thing that's
continue
cool
to.
about it. Like the device is constantly evolving. And I
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that the UI that they put on the Steam Deck is the future of Steam in general.
yeah.
You can already see parts of it incorporated into the main desktop client when you go to the preferences. They've changed some of it out for the actual Steam Deck UI. It's the new big picture mode. It's what's in a Tesla if you want to play Steam in your Tesla. Like that's gonna be the UI that you see everywhere, I think, from now
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, it's interesting to think like how central to their messaging it feels like the Steam Deck has become. Because I think like obviously like all these updates were a big thing, but I feel like one of the biggest things that we don't even always talk about as much, right, is like their appearance at Tokyo Game Show, right, and
Oh yeah, that was
how
huge.
much
Yeah.
effort they invested in evangelizing the Steam Deck in markets where PC gaming is underrepresented, right? Like we've talked on the show about how it's been on the rise in Japan the last couple years, like especially like with the pandemic, and like there being a shortage of PS5s. Like there was kind of this new renewed interest in PC as a platform over in Japan, but yeah, seeing Valve kind of recognize that and double down and be like, how can we, show up at events that historically we would have never bothered to have a presence at, and show off hardware and push how great, Elden Ring, the hottest game of the year, looks on Steam Deck, like things like that. I think those were all, you know, um, big moves that represent the way that they think about the Steam Deck being different than the other hardware that they've put out over the years. That like they have a commitment to
Well,
the deck.
not to mention like the investment at the Game Awards, like the number of Steam Decks they gave away, the presence that they had just through Jeff Keighley mentioning them
Yeah, how many did they give
continuously,
away?
making jokes at it. It's like it was an insane amount. It wasn't it one per minute of the show, so something
Yeah,
like 500, something crazy.
I'm looking it up right now, but yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, they give a
Over
good number away.
171. Oh, they gave out 171 more. So that was after the original. amount? Good
Yeah, it was
God.
planned, I think, to be like 300 and something, and then they gave away more as the
Yeah.
show just went long and long.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
Wild. Yeah, and I think it speaks to their desire to make it a thing, and to have it be a thing that people get behind and champion in a way that I don't know that there's been the same level of um community around the other devices that they've put out. I think they haven't had the same level of like fan support and fervor around them, and I think part of that is the Steam Deck being a great device, and part of it is the way in which they've positioned it and tried to get it in front of more people and like allow the folks that did get it early to evangelize it.
I think that's the huge change is the fact that this is just um an overwhelmingly well-received product, whereas you look at, say, the Steam controller, where it does have its fans, and the same with the Index. The Index is a niche product already. It's a VR headset, and it costs a lot of money, and it needs a big PC to power it. But the Steam controller didn't, and it was designed for everyone to be that kind of the inroads to PC gaming, where if you're not used to a keyboard and a mouse and to play games, and you want to use a controller but the game doesn't support it, here's a solution for you. But I just think wasn't a great product. Even as much as I love it, I just think there's so many flaws with it. So many flaws with the Steam controller.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of the failings of those previous devices have resulted in the success of the Steam Deck. They learned a lot of
Yeah, I
important
agree. And
lessons.
all of the things that they've learned from the Index, like uh the touchpads come directly from the Index controllers and bring it over there. Same with like some of the buttons and the sticks and things. Like they've learned from making their own hardware over the years.
Agreed. Agreed. So, let's talk about another little thing that they put out this year: the Steam Deck docking station, the Steam Deck dock, the Deck dock, whatever you want to call this thing. Hickory dickory deck dock. I don't know.
They interchange between dock and docking station. Like on their website, it's dock in the header, but they call it the docking station officially. But then within the wording, it says docking station adds extensibility to your already extensible Steam Deck. Dock deck to your TV. Like it's a mouthful, an absolute mouthful. But yeah, that thing, I like it. I do really wish that they would hurry up and add VRR and MSD support that has been planned and has been on the tech specs since I bought the thing, and it's
Yeah.
still not here. I have had this thing since August,
Yeah.
September maybe, and like I still cannot use FreeSync. I still cannot have multi-monitor support with the MSD. So it's just like it's a bit of a shame.
Yeah. I think. I
But
think.
having said that, I think it's good that they've got the baked-in firmware,
Yes.
like support, and then they can update it, and it's like a seamless thing. And I think for the majority of people, I'd still recommend this dock over a third-party dock
Agreed.
for that very reason.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's my biggest disappointment with the dock is I think when you compare what the pre-dock, this is such a hard thing to say because of how they talk about it. When you think about what the pre-docking station docked experience was like, right? Um, it's come a long way, right? Like they made a lot of improvements in the first several months that the Steam Deck was on the market. But then it feels like since the docking station came out, I don't necessarily feel like there's been that same level of optimization of improving the docked experience, of making it more seamless, of making it less prone to error.
I agree with you
And
because
that's
now,
frustrating.
even now, when it's plugged into my TV, and I did it earlier because I needed to update SteamOS to try out the ray tracing stuff that we spoke about at the beginning of the
Yeah.
show. Whenever I install an update, or even if I just need to restart my Steam Deck, or I go from desktop mode to gaming mode, I have to get up, I have to unplug it and plug it back in,
Yep.
or the picture will not come on the screen. And it's super frustrating that I still have to do that 6 months later. Like that should have been fixed. That should have been resolved. And I totally agree with you. It felt like they were rushing to get the dock out and they delayed it multiple times. And I think majority of that reason was for the software. At launch, I and we both bought those little dongles, right? The Amazon Basics dongles, which work great, and it's in my bag for when I go traveling. Um, they worked fine, but the UI didn't scale, so you had like this like huge, like really tiny like text on like a huge screen kind of
Yep.
scenario. You couldn't
You had black
change the
bars because you
games.
couldn't change
Yeah,
resolution.
exactly. You couldn't change the resolution to be any more than 800p within a game, so it was like locked to that 16 by 10 aspect ratio for the majority of cases, or you could go down to 720p if the game supported it. They fixed all of those problems, but I agree with you. Since then, it's not come along any further, and I think it should have by now. I feel like we should have the ability to set resolutions when it's docked versus resolutions when it's not docked, and be able to have like a more seamless experience where I can switch from desktop mode to gaming mode or restart my Steam Deck without having to get up and unplug it and plug it back in. And I still have issues where the audio drops out from time to time, and I have all sorts of problems with this thing. It's still better than nothing, and I'm still
Yeah.
glad it exists.
But the problems
But
with it lead to me not using it as much as I think I would otherwise. You know, like
same.
I like the experience of playing Persona 5 Royal docked on the Steam Deck, but it's just enough of a hassle that I'm more likely to be like, I'll just play it in handheld, you know? And I think that's a bad place for it to be. For it to be not not an overpriced device, but it's an expensive accessory for it to work kind
It's
of well.
costly. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
costly item. I think the cost is justified, as we mentioned in our
Yeah,
review, which I'll link in
absolutely.
the description.
The addition of the extra charger alone makes it worth it, right? Like the deck or the dock itself, I should say, costs probably like what, $30 when you actually factor in how much the brick itself is worth, you know? So it's not a
Yeah,
bad price, and it's nice to have an extra Steam Deck charger. But it's frustrating for it to be a device that I am so close to recommending to anybody and then having to have a bunch of caveats to be like, it's worth it, but is annoying.
I agree with you, but it is
This
nice. I have
close.
played a ton of games through that thing. Like I've said multiple times on the podcast, I love playing horror games with my friends.
Yeah.
The majority of them are like little indie games that we play. I played one of my favorite games of last year, Five Dates on it. I'm looking forward to playing 10 Dates on it. So I think it can work and it is an okay experience. It just needs improvement, and they are still working on stuff. Like I think it was in either November or December, we got support for auto mounting of drives that are plugged into the dock. So if you had like a big hard drive full of games, you could like chuck them on there. So you had all of your ROMs or like a bunch of games downloaded that you wanted to transfer from the internal drive to an external drive. It will now do that, which was really nice. Prior to that, you had to like manually mount them or go into desktop mode or run a script. So they are still working on stuff, and I think they've shown that they are willing to put the effort in and willing to kind of persevere with getting stuff done. I think it just depends what their priorities are.
Agreed. So, one of the other things that you highlighted on our list here was the iFixit partnership that started back out up in May of last year, and of course, that is kind of the official third party, solution for you as a Steam Deck user to like buy new hardware if you want to upgrade your hard drive, if you want to get a cool custom shell, things like that. They have a lot of new screens, things like that, like all kinds of replacement options.
But you can buy pretty much every part from them. That's a genuine Steam Deck part, which is very unusual. But you can buy even like a motherboard. You can buy the external casing. You can buy everything. You could essentially build a Steam Deck yourself if you wanted to, with all
It's
of the stuff
wild.
that they sell, which is kind of crazy. And say for example, you bought like the one of the lower end Steam Decks like we did. We got the 256 gig model, but you wanted to then upgrade to the slightly nicer screen that you get on the 512 gigabyte model. You can do that. You can buy a replacement screen. They're like 90 pounds or $100. You could swap out the fan if you had one of the noisy fans. You can buy like a different fan, and they're all parts that come directly from Valve. It's the only place you can actually buy a Steam Deck AC adapter as well, like an official OEM AC adapter. You can buy them directly from here, and you can see how much they cost. They're £25 or $30. So you were right. A large part of the cost of that dock was the charger.
Can you tell me that thing's not worth $30? That's insane, right? Like it's worth $30, I'll say.
But that was the only repair solution for like 6 months until we got to September when they finally opened repair centers. Up until that point, if you broke your Steam Deck, your solution was repair it yourself with iFixit parts, or find someone you know to repair it, or hope and pray that Valve were going to be friendly with you and give you a replacement through the RMA process, which for the majority of people they did. And then they eventually got their repair centers online. And it just feels like, again, it's another example of, I don't think they thought it was going to be as popular as it was. And I don't think they realized that they were going to need to have things like repair centers in place and parts available for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool that their reaction was swift, and also that they have multiple options for you, right? Like you if you're comfortable tinkering, as like we've talked about, I think a lot of Steam Deck users probably are. Great, then iFixit's a wonderful solution for you, right? But if not, you have a more traditional option available to you now, which I think it goes to show that one of the big advantages is their ability to be flexible and react to things, and I think that they've done a really good job of that, So while we're on the Fixit or iFixit partnership repair side of things, I want to pull another question from the question block. This one comes from Shififu over on the Discord, who wrote in and said, "Thanks for creating the greatest Steam Deck podcast ever. The open nature of the platform will never cease to justify the purchase. I feel particularly smug when trying to figure out what to stream from my PC, Series X, or PS4 before settling down to play Vampire Survivors in front of some reality TV. My main question is, will there ever be community display setting config similar to controller layout? Sometimes I love to tinker, sometimes I just want to play a game. I think community battery saver, frame rate, and beauty options would take the deck a bit closer to a mainstream consumer device, even closer if there was some sort of crowdsourced default for each game. Secondly, do you think there will there ever be an OLED screen replacement available via iFixit or unofficial channels?"
So first things first, I want to know from you, Fifu, what reality TV do you watch while you play your deck?
It's got to be Below Deck, right? You're playing on your deck while you're watching Below Deck.
I've just been watching Below Deck. There's a new season coming to Netflix in the UK soon, so I'm prepping, ready for that. I'm excited. That is one of the greatest reality TV shows of all time. But to answer your question about the community display settings, I don't know about the display settings, but I do think, because I think it's just that relies on the game and having settings for the game and the configs for the game, and each game's going to be different. This was actually like a plugin idea that I had myself and want to see if I can persist and do this, but I need to find out where all of the config settings are saved for every single game. And that would need to be like a community approach, I think. I don't think it's something that Valve could commit to. However, when it comes to the performance settings, things like the TDP, the frame rate caps, things like that you can set yourself in the Steam OS menu, I could easily see them implementing that. I could easily see people being able to upload it and just being like, this will run at 40 hertz, this will run at 60 hertz, this will run at whatever,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it would be so nice to see these things, and something we've talked about before is like how valuable the community controller setting is. I would love to see that for literally anything that Valve wants to support it with. But as you've said, I don't think it's as cut and dry as, unfortunately, as the controller situation, which is pretty perfect, right? Like it's very, very well executed, and I could see why it's not quite as simple to do for some of these other things, because there's just more nuance to them, than just like, this is the configuration I set up.
Yeah, one thing I do want to point you to, though, Shifufu, is a plugin for Decky called Deck Settings. And this takes information from sharedeck.games, which is a website. And you can go here and you can just type in the name of the game. and it will tell you the configuration and like the optimized configuration. And essentially, the plugin you type in, it will detect what game you're playing, and it will tell you what to set your settings to. So it'll be like set the graphics preset to low, set the screen refresh rate to 40 FPS, things like that, and use this version of Proton, use TAA, set the in-game FSR to balance, that kind of stuff. So there is a solution. It's not automated, but if you're not the kind of person who is confident in kind of dialing stuff in, there is a solution. And sharedeck.games is a great website, and you can log in with your Steam account, and it will show you what games you've got and kind of the best way to optimize things.
So how about the OLED screen?
Oh, the OLED screen. We spoke about this. I think it was a few months back, right? I actually think that there is going to be a solution for this. I
Yeah.
think I could easily see it coming to iFixit as a kit, in the same way that the SSD drives, they're not official Valve ones. They're just like an unofficial part outside of that agreement they have with Valve that they've tested and they know work with the Steam Deck. I could easily see us getting an OLED screen. I think we'll probably get one from someone like JSORX first, or like one of those other kind of accessory maker brands. And I could see us getting an OLED screen. I'm hoping we get an OLED screen, because that will be something I chuck in my basket and get on my Steam Deck within seconds. Like I will set aside my apprehension of opening up my Steam Deck, and I will do everything I want to do to the Steam Deck in one hit. Then I'll replace the screen. I'll put GuliKit sticks on. I'll put a 2 TB drive in there. I'll change out my noisy fan, and I'll do all of those things in one go. And I want to change the back plate as well to one of those like smoky gray ones.
I would love to send mine to you and have you do all that too. So let me know how it goes on yours, and then we'll follow up. Yeah, I'm aligned with you on that one. I think we'll see that sooner than later. So swinging it back to the community support side of things, this is something that obviously we're pretty invested in, right? Like it's a big part of our content has been around Steam Deck, has been figuring out the community support, through things like Decky and being able to like create cool, unique plugins that do wacky shit with the Steam Deck.
Oh yeah, like Decky, EmuDeck, Cryo Utilities, they're things we've spoken about at length on the show. Like the community support it knows no bounds. If there's a problem, the community will try and solve it. Just like the thing with the performance profiles, right? There's always a solution. It's not always the most elegant solution, because sometimes you do need Valve's input for that, but there's always a solution to every problem, I think. Not to mention stuff like Heroic Launcher, right? Being able to install games from like the Epic Game Store without having to download launchers, or like Lutris, that kind of thing. It's insane the amount of stuff you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we already called out EmuDeck earlier, and there's just so many amazing tools like that. And it seems like, especially considering Valve, isn't restrictive about it. It seems like the opportunity to like do crazy things with the Steam Deck is like really only starting to be realized. I often think about like what are the wacky things that people are going to figure out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years into its life cycle. Let alone when we get a successor that has more power, right? Or more features to be exploited. Do
you think we see a revision to the Steam Deck this year?
I don't. I feel like it feels early. I think the thing only came out last year. They only got to the point where you could get your hands on one without waiting at the end of last year. They've talked a lot about like things like wanting to get it in storefronts and wanting to, I think they have a lot of goals for it, that now that they have a stable product, a stable OS, and, a base built around it, I think you probably want to spend a year or so with it on the market, and just you kind of like fully committing to pushing for it and trying to get it in more people's hands, before you release a new model and then try to get that original wave of purchasers to double dip and get another one, right? Because I think if they came out with another one this year, I would feel like I wasn't ready for an update. Whereas like if they give me 3 years, 4 years, I think at that point you're like, yeah, I'm ready. I want another one. I'll do something new.
I agree. I'd like to see them ditch the 64 gig model and replace that with a 128, and then
Yeah.
up the 512 to 1 terabyte and make that jump from the 256 to the top end model a little bit more worthwhile. I feel like 512 gigs plus that questionably nicer screen, because as soon as you chuck a screen
It's
protector
like
on there,
whatever.
it's kind of like, what's the point
Yeah,
anyway?
like give me a
Um,
number 2 that's got a little more power under the hood, terabyte of memory, and an OLED screen in the next, I would say, like 4 years, right? I think,
I want all of the other things, but I think this year I would love to see them ditch the 64 gig model and have
yeah,
one that's
yeah.
NVMe across the
I
board.
mean, if they're giving
And I
us like
know that they,
like a not a successor, but like a wave 2, like a next generation, that's more
yeah.
what I mean.
Do,
But
do you remember though in the interview that we spoke about with Sean Hollister over at The Verge, they mentioned that even on a successor, they'll probably opt for more battery life rather than performance. And I
yeah,
think we're gonna have the same level of performance probably for 3-4 years. Think of it in terms of like a console generation.
yeah,
I
I
could
think
see
that's the way to think about
it's
it.
like then like a mid-gen refresh, and we get like an update and a slightly more power, and then in like 7 years' time, we get like a Steam Deck 2 kind of thing.
Yeah, more power and a little bit better battery life and a sharper screen are really all I'm looking for. Because I don't think it needs to be a lot more powerful, but you got to think, right? Like 5 years from now, there's going to be new hot games that it's probably struggling to keep up with or that it just straight up can't keep up with. Whereas, like, I think the fact that it can play games like Elden Ring, right, which was the game of the year last year in handheld mode is insane. That is an insane benchmark for it to be able to achieve.
Well,
And
or
I,
Cyberpunk, which the last
sure,
generation of consoles couldn't even play.
or you know like older games at this point, but when they're you know like something like Spider-Man, right, that is like really
Yeah.
intensive, that moves really quick. I
Well,
think
and The Last of Us Part One's gonna be
that
playable over
that's
here.
going to be the number one game on Steam Deck, that right, for like a month at least.
Yeah.
So you got to imagine that they want to keep up that parity. I think they're going to want to be able to be like, oh, like this is the only place where you can play all of these insane AAA third party games on a handheld, right, is on Steam Deck. And that's, you know, obviously the Steam Deck and the Switch are not in real direct competition with each other, but that's the one thing that the Steam Deck will always have over the Switch, you know, right? And like that's not to say that they have to keep that advantage, but I think that is a big advantage, especially for the more casual player who just wants another handheld in their rotation that we talked about, right? Like I think to them being able to be like, oh, I can play Elden Ring on this thing, I can play Jedi Survivor on this thing, like I think that's attractive. That's really cool, especially if you're a PC gamer.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think I can go back to just having closed wall consoles anymore. I like the fact that this is open. I can do whatever the hell I want with it. Even if the Switch comes out and is at performance parity with the Steam Deck and it can play Elden Ring and they bring over games like that, I think I'm always going to want to have a Steam Deck in my life at this point. I know you said it's the only place you can play. Obviously, we have seen competition from Ioneo and GPD kind of stepping up a little bit this year.
Yeah, we'll see
And
what
then
actually comes of those, I guess.
yeah, they're very expensive devices. They're in a different price category, and I feel like if you're looking for more power at the moment, those are the places to go. But you're looking at $1,000 before you get to any kind of meaningful difference,
Yeah,
which is a lot of money to spend on a handheld.
and it's not to say that they're not nice, but it's just like I don't know, like it. I think for the price, there's things that in which they still feel like they're lacking, and I'm interested in them for sure. Like I would love to get my hands on one and really be able to, you know, make a meaningful comparison video. Hey, Ioneo, if you want to send us one and let us know. Um, but the justification of spending like what is essentially the amount you'd spend on a gaming PC for this thing, that is really, you know, it's more powerful, but like how significantly more powerful, and how, you know, how
Pretty
much.
significantly more powerful. In terms of the watts that it can draw, I think it's something at least twice as powerful.
Really?
It's
Wow. I didn't realize there
yeah.
was that much of a gap between them. That is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that they can run like pretty high spec games. which is why they cost $1,000
Yeah.
to $1,600.
The cheapest one looked like it was what, $950, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, the Ioneo Geek, yeah, but they do have the older model, the Ioneo Air, but that one is lower power than a Steam Deck. It's the Ioneo 2, the Air 2, the Air Pro, and the Next Pro are the ones that are more powerful than the Steam Deck.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if any of these really end up like making a splash, but I have to imagine that like they're going to struggle because I think part of the appeal of the Steam Deck is that it has Valve behind it and it has like that cachet of being part of the Steam ecosystem. And not that you couldn't use these devices that way, because to your point, right? Like you can run the Steam Deck OS on these devices, like that's you could run it like a Steam Deck. And that would be fine, but I don't know. I for some reason I struggle to see like a significant market erupt, building up around one of these third-party devices. I feel like they are always going to be kind of like a high-end alternative for somebody who's really, hard in that enthusiast market. But again, I had my doubts about the Steam Deck. So maybe this is just another emerging trend that we're only seeing the beginning of, and like a couple years from now we'll be like, oh yeah, these handheld gaming PCs are everywhere, and there's a bunch of them on the market, and Valve blew open this whole new thing by developing the Steam Deck and creating this OS that is open source,
I hope so. Competition, I think, is only good. Ioneo are working on
Agreed.
their own Linux-based OS, which will no doubt use Proton, which obviously is backed by Valve. So I think it's only going to benefit everyone. The more of these like handheld devices we have, the more devices that are running on Linux, it's only going to benefit Steam Deck players in the long run.
Yeah, agreed. So I think to wrap it up, it's been a great first year here with the Steam Deck, and I think officially next week I'm going to have to update the intro to the show because I don't think it's the hot new handheld anymore. Now it's something else. So if you've got a recommendation for what I should call it in the intro now instead of Valve's hot new handheld, you let me know in the comments down below or write in on all the ways that you can. Head over to flipscreen.games. You can hit us up via email, join the Discord, however you choose to get in touch. We appreciate you tuning into this week's show. Remember, if you want to go and become a Patreon producer, if you want to get more content from us, however you want to get involved with the community or show your support, head over to flipscreen.games. That's the website. And go over and click on some stuff. It helps us out. Won't cost you a nickel. So, for the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. Do you have your Steam Deck? Hold it up real quick. This has been the Steam Deck. Hello, it's right here. Okay. Nope, you don't got it?
It's downstairs.
Damn, both of us just whiffing that opportunity. Okay, you know what? Well, spiritually, he's been the Steam Deck, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.